Hi there, shalom uvracha, everyone. Like all new parents who bring home their first child from the hospital after being born, my wife and I were in a state of awe. Here there was this beyond this world gift, this bringing home a human being, this chelek elokam imal, this godly piece of from above, and we brought home a piece of perfection. Perfection just by their mere presence in the world. And when our daughter was just 5 months old, I remember holding her while the family was on some kind of a family trail, a little hike up in the Golan, Pesach time. And I'll never forget the moment that I leaned on a fence to proceed on the trail, and it happened to cause a little scrape on my daughter's top left shoulder. It left nothing more than a scrape that faded away after about 3 minutes, but that was the first time I consciously felt that I was doing something that was tampering with perfection, and it was horrifying. I could still feel it till today. And as our children grow older and they become more and more aware and conscious of the world that surrounds them, this world that they were brought into, it's inevitable that more and more layers of tmimut, of this purity, becomes peeled off and shed away. So if I allow myself to go to this very vulnerable and dark place, I come to this realization that today, literally today, today's one of the days that I woke up dreading more than any other day that I could remember in my life up until now. I wanted to share a little bit why is that. So, on a very general level, this morning, today stands out as a horrific dealing with the loss of tmimut on a very large scale, on a much more larger scale than I think I'm willing to currently admit. And obviously what we're all dealing with right now, this horrific story with Chaim Walder. And this painful nightmare becomes more and more devastating through all the different opinions on the matter as well. And all it takes is like 2 or 3 minutes of getting completely lost in some social media vacuum of darkness, or hearing your child ask, Abba, what happened to Chaim Walder when they come home from school? And all this brings us to the notion that there's something much larger taking place. There's a conversation that needs to happen, and everyone's focusing on the conversation that's happening between us and our children, between us and ourselves as a society, and of course that needs to happen. But I feel so strongly that knowing how to speak about the situation is secondary to the matter at hand, because there's something in the way. You know, the ego feels the need to dictate and decide how we should or shouldn't feel about certain situations, what we should or shouldn't say. It's quite often it's the ego that dictates to us exactly how we should conduct ourselves. But how on earth are any of us parents supposed to know how to deal with the issue at hand? How are any of us really supposed to know how to explain to our children when they come home with today's question, whether his books are by our children's bedside for years, or whether they heard one of the kids in school talking about what he or she's parents may have mentioned to them the night before? Like, where's that voice that turns to God and in a place of admitting that I have absolutely no idea? I could have never have imagined such a warped and dark reality. So what prevents me from admitting that I just have no clue? Because whatever I come up with, as much as I may believe that Hashem believes in me and He trusts me as their parents, I think that God also trusts me, the individual, the parent and the individual, to go to a place where I admit that this is much bigger than whatever I think it is. And all of the effects it may have on our precious children is just larger than life. And that's why I don't sense that this is a dramatization of any of the things we mentioned. Because when we're dealing with these things, how could we dramatize them? It is what it is. And this seems to me to be so much more important than what will happen after, which is the deep work of calling out the unhealthy nature that exists in certain specs of our society, and that'll follow. Don't worry, that conversation is right there. But before we even attempt to think we could know how to speak about our children regarding this issue, I really sense so strongly that this conversation with God is way overdue. That there are certain things in life, specifically this one, where the first response is En li musag. Ribono shel olam, Master of the world, I have no idea. And I'm going to sit in that space for a little bit, and from there, go to the place of you believing that within me is the wisdom to pass on to my children. May we have extra siyat dishmaya help from above, and the sensitivity and awareness that we so need right now. May we only hear good news. A lot of love to everyone.